Welcome, and thank you for joining us from your home for the second annual Parenting Learning event presented by Burnaby Family Life in collaboration this year with the Burnaby Public Library. We are grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and play and host this virtual event on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam nations. My name is Nancy Grenier. I work at Burnaby Family Life, a charity that has been providing services to families and individuals in need in our community for the past 50 years. Every year, we organize a parenting learning event, and this year we are bringing you the event online in collaboration with the Burnaby Public Library. We bring this to you with funding from the BC Ministry of Children and Family Development, and thanks to that support, we're able to bring you the event for free. We also want to do a shout out and thank Gary and Sandra Wilson at What's on Burnaby for their support and for the promotion of the event. So every Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll be here with a new speaker, new discussion, new topic, to talk about something that's important to families. And these topics were selected with input from the parents who participate in our programs at Burnaby Family Life, and also with input from a steering committee comprising of education and community leaders. So we're grateful for everyone's input. We hope you're going to find this interesting. This year will be a 4-part event. So as I mentioned, every Thursday night. We really want to hear from you. If there's any ideas you have, any suggestions on how we can make things better, please let us know. You can reach us through bflgrowscommunity.org. And also, if you don't have time to stay with us tonight, the program is scheduled to run until 8 o'clock. If this is too much time for you to dedicate to us, then please access the recording on the website, so you'll be able to watch the session at your convenience. So get comfortable, and let's go over to Sangeeta, who's going to get us started with tonight's program.
Thank you, Nancy, and good evening, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you today. My name is Sangeeta, and I also work at Burnaby Family Life. Tonight's topic is nature, a playground for all children. It is the fourth talk. Today is the third of a series of our 4 talks today. And all our talks aim to encourage parents and caregivers to sustain their resiliency during and beyond the pandemic. It is also a part of our ongoing effort to provide parents and caregivers with the tools they need to support the healthy development of their children. Today's topic, I think, is going to take many of us back to our own childhoods and hopefully remind us of the richness of the simple things in life. Over the last several decades, children's play has become more and more structured with skillfully crafted activities for every stage and age. Of course, only with the hope of providing the very best learning opportunities for our children. But this has come at the cost of reducing unstructured play in the lives of our children. Research has consistently shown us that unstructured play has a vital role in child development. And it is unstructured play that is one of the most effective ways for our children to process their experiences and make sense of the world around them. Play is natural to children, and outdoor play is even more important as this experience makes it richer as we connect with nature. So one of the best gifts we can give our children is reconnecting with nature. I'm sure all of you have experienced this for yourself over the last year when you went outdoors into the trails and parks and felt rejuvenated physically and mentally. And so to tell us more about the importance of outdoor play for the healthy development of our children and how time in nature helps children connect with themselves and the rest of the world, we have with us today Jarrett Kretzel. Jarrett is the founder and director of Hand in Hand Nature Education, an outdoor educational program located in the Comox Valley and Campbell River. He has over 20 years of experience teaching nature education from preschools to universities in Canada and the US. There are many interesting things Jarrett has been involved in, and so I will encourage all of you to go to our website to learn more about him and his education program. And now, without wasting another minute, I'm going to hand it over to Jarrett.
Thank you very much, Sangeeta. That was a wonderful introduction. Hello, forest friends. It's nice to have you join us this evening for a workshop called Nature, a Playground for All Children, the long-lasting benefits of play in the outdoors for the physical and mental well-being of children. Today is Thursday, March 18th. We're going to be running this presentation from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's hosted by the Burnaby Family Life and co-hosted by the Burnaby Public Library. When I begin all of our programs, whether it's a morning outdoor program or afternoon, or I do an in-person workshop or an online presentation, I always start everything we do with our hand-in-hand song. So I'd like for you all to join me in that song. I know that you're all probably cozy on a couch or on a chair, but I'm going to ask for you all to stand up for the moment. And I'm going to just step you through the words of our song and the actions, and feel free to join along if you're feeling comfortable. First, I'd like for you all to get out your big, bright yellow suns, make it big and bright. And on 3, we're going to sing together. Feel free to sing along and do the gestures. Here we go, everyone. 1, 2, 3. Whether in sun or rain or snow, we love the forest and we're ready to go. We're ready to explore all across the land, hand in hand, in hand, in hand. For those of you that joined me, thank you for lending your voices and those physical gestures. I really appreciate that. It's a really nice way to begin the presentation because it really sets the foundation of what we're talking about today. We're talking about playing in nature and what that looks and feels like. In the program that I work with, Hand in Hand Nature Education, whether in sun or rain or snow, we're always outside. We don't have an indoor space. So our forest friends are dropped off outside, they're picked up outside, and everything in between happens outside. If Environment Canada issues a wind warning in effect, we do have an indoor space that we can relocate to. It's just a temporary space. It's not attached to our program necessarily. But that's the only other time that we go inside. Other than that, we're outside and we're playing with all the treasures that the forest and the beach can provide. Just going to quickly go through the plan for this evening. I'm going to start off with the importance of team building activities, then go into some really touching upon what Sangeeta was mentioning, the early memories of playing in nature. It's really useful to sort of tap into our own personal experiences. Then I'll go into the history, definition, philosophy, and benefits of playing in nature, what is needed to offer a safe and comfortable, those are the key words, safe and comfortable experience when playing in nature. We'll go through some safety guidelines to the activities that you're going to be offering children, required gear, site assessments such as risks versus hazards, risky play, we'll define it, we'll talk about the categories and the benefits of. We're going to talk a little bit about the flow channel and how it relates to anxiety and boredom. And then we'll finish off with age appropriateness play. And then I'll also talk a little bit about reflection activities and provide you with some resources. So let's jump right into it. The importance of team building activities. Team building, for those of you that don't know, it's the process of turning a group of individuals into a cohesive team. We start all of our programs with some sort of team building activities. I can't stress the importance of these team building activities in our programs, and I do it also in my own family life. You know, when you're taking a group of children outside, you want to make sure that you have a certain understanding and respect and a way of communicating with one another. You know, because when you're going outside and you're exposed to all of the elements outside, you really have to have that sense of team and trust. And these team building activities are really important in establishing that trust with whoever you're working with, whether it's your own child or a group of children. So I can't stress enough the importance of team building activities, and there's just a plethora of activities that you can search online. You can just type in team building activities for 2-year-old children or 5-year-old children, and you'll have enough activities to last you for for that age that your child is at that time. So the team building component of our program, it facilitates personal and interpersonal growth, such as communication, problem solving, trust building, risk taking, and cooperation. And it's instrumental in the practice of SEDL skills, social, emotional development, and learning. And through these hands-on group cooperative and non-competitive activities, that's the key there, they're group cooperative and they're non-competitive, children are able to expand on their development in communication, cooperation, trust, and problem-solving skills in an atmosphere that is safe, respectful, and most importantly, fun. Children are guided in making connections between these activities and real life situations, which is the key. You're sort of all the lessons you're learning in those team building activities, and you're able to apply it once you go out and play outside. And families have even reported a positive impact on home climate, child performance, and interpersonal dynamics when these activities are reinforced in the home. I do want to stress that whenever you're introducing any one of your activities, always talk about challenge by choice. We want to give children the challenge to participate or not. And if they choose not to, we just ask them to stand outside the circle, but of course within the space where we can see them. So challenge by choice is really important. We want to make sure that everyone's entering any of the activities at their own pace and time and speed, so that they're entirely present when they do arrive. Before I begin to really get into this presentation, I just want to tap into a little bit about of our early memories of playing in nature. It's so important to begin with this foundation. And in doing so, what I'm going to ask you all to do right now is, if you feel comfortable, again, challenge by choice, is close down your senses. So close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. Close your ears if you know how to do that. And close your nose if you're able to do that. And just sort of shut down your senses and try to go inward a bit. And what I'm going to do is ask you just a series of 4 questions, and I just want you to just kind of quickly reflect on what answers immediately pop up. So the first question is, who was with you while you were playing in nature? And again, these are early memories of playing in nature. And where did your play in nature take place? What did your play in nature feel like? And finally, what did your play in nature offer you? These are really important questions to ask yourself and reflect on, either right now while we're in this presentation or later to come back to. It's important to tap into those early memories of playing in nature, because really what we want to do is sort of tap into all of the wonders and the beauties and all the benefits that we gain from our own playing in nature, to be able to identify and relate to the experiences that we're offering children. And once you tap in and reflect and remember those experiences, you'll be able to facilitate an experience of playing in nature in a lot more rewarding way. I always start presentations with talking about a brief history. It's great to know where we've come from and where we're going. So here's just a brief history of playing in nature. It starts a long, long time ago. Some of you may know that song and are singing the next line. That's where playing in nature started a long, long time ago. And I'm talking about a long, long time ago, like before schools, before cars and towns and lights and buildings and countries. I mean, in a time when humans lived and with the land. Think about children back then. How did they play? There wasn't even such a thing playing in nature, because it was all nature. There wasn't a thing playing outside because there was no inside at that time. So I'm talking about a long, long time ago when there wasn't even inside housing structures. So think about how those children are playing, and what we do in our program and what I do with my children is really no different from what was done a long, long time ago. Back then, children were playing in the forest. They were playing in the deserts, on the beaches, on the mountaintops, in the rivers. And that's exactly what we're doing with the children today. We're bringing them outside, and we're exposing them to all the treasures and the natural resources that these natural spaces have to offer. So less is definitely more when playing outside. You know, sometimes we bring out shovels and buckets and carabiners and ropes, but really the less we bring out, the more they're encouraged to play with the leaves and the sticks and the rocks and the grass. And that's the connection piece that we want whenever they're playing in nature. So brief history in playing in nature. It started a long, long time ago. And then in rural areas and historical times, access to nature has not been a problem. So the play just carried on. But over the last 3 centuries, with increasing urbanization and nature deficit disorder, I'm sure you've heard of that term, there have been many changes in playing in nature. And I'd like to now bring your attention to our very first slide. The source of this graphic is from the UK's Daily Mail, and it represents 3 generations of a family in the UK and illustrates how our roaming space has shrunk just over the course of a generation. So I'm just going to bring your attention on that slide down to the bottom where it says great grandfather. That's where this began. That's where this begins. So great-grandfather George, who was aged 8 in 1919, was allowed to walk 6 miles to go fishing. And so that large circle, that dotted red circle, that was George's roaming space in 1919. Moving on to grandfather Jack, aged 8, same age, so now we're talking 40 years later in 1950, was able to walk about 1 mile on his own to the woods. So you could see in just that short period of time, in 40 years, the roaming space, how that's drastically shrunk from 1919 to 1950. Then moving on to mother, up at the top, Vicky, same age, 8 in 1979, so 30 years later, was allowed to walk to the swimming pool alone half a mile away. So her roaming play space has shrunk about half or so. And then finally, we get to the son, Ed, who's also 8 years old, and this is in current day, is only allowed to walk on his own to the end of the street, 300 yards. So you can see in just the history of playing in nature how far or how close we've come to shrinking our roaming space and how that's affected how we interact with nature and our play. I'm not going to leave you there with our history. I'm always going to leave on a positive note, because today, on March 18th, 2021, you are all here participating in a presentation called Nature, a Playground for All Children. So this presentation is a part of this historical account of playing in nature. We're going to learn about the benefits and the philosophies of playing in nature, and my hope today is that after this presentation, you're going to be inspired to take children outside to play in nature again in a safe and comfortable way. So playing in nature, I keep talking about that, but it's nice to really define what it is we're talking about. And I know these are simple terms, but it's good to get a grasp of what it is that we're talking about tonight. So what is playing? Playing as a verb, the definition is to engage in activity for enjoyment and recreation rather than a serious or practical purpose. So synonyms such as fun, games, sport, recreation. An example in a sentence is, when I climb trees, I am playing. So now let's define nature. What is nature? Nature, the noun, is a definition, is the phenomena of the physical world collectively, including plants, animals, the landscape, and other features and products of the earth. So synonyms such as natural world or environment, open air, outdoors, out of doors, wild, and wilderness. An example in a sentence is, I love to be in nature. Now let's bring it together. Let's bring playing and nature together. And how do we define what is playing in nature? By definition, it's to engage in activity for enjoyment and recreation outside. Synonyms such as nature walks, driftwood shelter building, skipping river stones, forest beach treasure hunts, etc. An example in a sentence is, I love playing in nature by climbing trees. I'd like to move into the philosophies of playing in nature. There's lots of philosophies out there. We pull from many philosophies such as Waldorf and Montessori, Reggio Emilia approach, the 8 Shields philosophy, which is a wonderful philosophy. There's a lot to it. The coyote mentoring equally, they're all wonderful philosophies, but I do want to talk a little bit about structured and unstructured play. Structured play is generally led by parents or guardians, and they're providing direction or a specific task in order for children to learn a new skill. So structured play is typically a physical or cognitive activity, such as a brain skill. Unstructured play means open-ended or creative free play with endless possibilities. It is child-led and directed and doesn't require an outcome or product, such as playing in the forest or construction with beach driftwood or painting with mud, etc. Unstructured play provides children with experiences in creativity, imagination, decision-making, and the development of overall emotional and social skills. And researcher Penny Tassoni states that children tend to concentrate and persevere for long periods when they are in control of their learning. Their levels of motivations are higher because they have chosen something that appeals to them. And that unstructured play, that philosophy, is what we follow mostly in our forest and nature school. We follow mostly the forest and nature school model, which there's 2 components to that. There's child-led activities and nature-based. Nature-based, like I explained at the beginning, we're in the forest, we're on the beaches, there's no inside structure, we're in nature fully and completely. And child-led is the unstructured play. So we really are just creating this safe and comfortable space for children to just play in and be the children that they are. We very rarely bring in our own agenda or curriculum, where we're always just allowing the children to steer their own ship and really get engaged and interested and connected to whatever it is that they're finding interest in. And ultimately, through that unstructured play and through that forest and nature school model, this ultimate philosophy of connection is what we're ultimately and essentially achieving in our program. It's a connection to the natural environment. It's a connection to whatever activity the child is involved in. It's a connection to the family and the friends that are offering that activity. And ultimately, it's a connection to ourselves. The children become so connected to themselves, and the way they reflect and process through their own connectivity through playing in nature is really fantastic. I'm going to end this presentation later on with reflection activities. And when we reflect and have our closing circles with 2-year-old children, just the way they process the day and reflect is really quite something. So that connection piece is really one of the ultimate goals of our program. I just want to mention that there's an online resource of blogs and activities, research, events, and tools to help get children learning and playing and connecting outside. You may have heard of, they're called Childhood by Nature. And they report that nature can help children feel more attentive, less stress, more self-disciplined, more engaged, more interested, and more physically active and fit, which in turn creates a safe and comfortable time and space for children to gain this immense sense of connection. And that's such an important piece in our program. There is just like an ongoing list of benefits to playing in nature. I have some of my go-tos that I love to talk about is just like healthier bodies and minds, environment, and the future. So starting with healthier bodies, studies show increased frequency of physical exercise in a challenging environment helps to develop motor skills, such as navigating uneven terrain. And some research demonstrates less sick days due to playing in nature, which we certainly see in our program. Healthier minds. Playing in nature offers an opportunity to be sociable and also have time alone. Space and resources are naturally available, allowing children to investigate and problem solve. Playing in nature provides time to just be, where children can relax and explore their own interests. And research shows an increase in personal motivation, a willingness to try new tasks, and the ability to persist at tasks. Healthier environment. Playing in nature provides an understanding and appreciation of the natural environment, knowledge of how systems interlink and how we affect our surroundings. By spending time outdoors and using it to learn and play affects us at a deep level, and that's the connection piece. It's this connection with nature that opens us up to care more for the environment as adults. And healthier future. Many of the skills that develop as a result of playing in nature are essential life skills that in time will benefit the economy, and not just the world economy, the sort of the Earth's entire economy, which is including developing determination to complete tasks, learning to work together as a team, and communicating effectively. The list goes on and on and on as far as the benefits go, but I just want to touch upon a bit more of the continued research regarding the importance of outdoor play. Playing in nature provides the ultimate in open-ended materials and opportunities for children. It allows them to choose activities that suits their interest and developmental stage. Parents and guardians can meet their children where they're at. That's so key, and we're going to talk about that later when we talk about risky play. And use strategies like storytelling, drama, role-playing, songs, and creative problem solving to make many connections to learning. And that creates authentic, meaningful playing and learning experiences for children. We'll talk about that later when we're doing our site assessments. We want to make sure we're providing a meaningful playing and learning experience. And that type of experience, this is a whole playing, whole learning approach, which is really just a fantastic way to expose children to any sort of activity. Playing in nature, it challenges children on a physical level just by taking place in nature. So navigating uneven terrain and providing logs, stumps, rocks, hills, and trees to climb, to slide down, to jump over, etc. It supports the development of gross motor skills. Playing and learning outside for prolonged periods have shown to have positive impacts on children's development, particularly in areas of balance and agility, but also manual dexterity, physical coordination, tactile sensitivity, and depth perception. being outdoors strengthens the immune system of both children and the parents and guardians who are participating in offering those activities. Cognitively speaking, children learn so much about the world through playing in nature. They see how the change in season is presented in nature. They witness the changing colors and the falling of leaves, as well as the electric green of new leaves that come in the springtime, such as this time of year right outside our windows. They learn that when temperatures fall to a certain level of cold, water freezes. They learn that through direct experience how snow changes from fluffy to squeaky to slushy to icy with the changes in the weather. Experiencing the forces of nature throughout the year teaches children firsthand that they are a part of a larger world, and noticing tiny flora and fauna increases a child's sense of wonder and helps build compassion for the world around them. Additionally, a child's social and emotional skills are developed in any outdoor setting. Confidence and perseverance growth. They grow through pushing physical limits. Social skills grow through participating in imaginative play with peers. And creative and critical thinking are increased through problem solving and putting ideas into motion. Essentially, playing in nature, it holds the interests of the whole child, allowing nature to provide children with what they need to develop into healthy adults. I'd just like to quickly share some recent research with you all from a lady by the name of Gemma Goldberg. She's a former teacher, and she's currently doing a PhD on the impact of nature on children's development and well-being. She was looking into the question, what is the evidence that nature contact improves self-regulation? And she found that correlation studies which use satellite imagery to measure green space around children's homes or schools have found a relationship between green space and reduced behavioral problems. One study actually found that access to parks and gardens related to lower incidence of conduct, peer, and hyperactivity problems. Adding natural materials to a preschool outdoor area was found to improve self-regulation, focus, and socialization. And finally, for 7 to 12-year-old children with ADHD, a 20-minute walk in nature improved their performance in attention tests more so than urban walk. Attention is a key aspect of self-regulation as it involves managing distractions. So she also wanted to look into the question, what does psychology research tell us about trees? This is really important in her big study about nature, specifically in trees. In her research, she's been reading all about types of nature and its impacts on stress, cognition, and behaviors, and found that trees are what seem to get a special mention time and time again. There's something about trees which seem to have more an effect on children than any other type of nature. A forest environment was found to have a positive effect on 4 to 5-year-old children's speech, language development, and engagement when compared to a classroom environment. In Canada, the States, and Colombia, school sites with greater proportion of landscape covered by trees as opposed to lawn were associated with better academic performance. When small trees were placed in a classroom, fewer behavioral incidences took place. Sitting and looking at a forest landscape decreased heart rate and blood pressure and led to more self-regulation. Children in a classroom with tree views from the window had higher end-of-term grades and rated their course more positively than children doing the same course in a matched classroom which overlooked the concrete wall. So there's definitely supported research that says time in nature, and especially with trees, has their tremendous benefits. I can go on and on and on about all these benefits, but I'm just going to pause there and move on to what is needed to offer a safe and comfortable experience playing in nature. The first thing, like most things, champions. You need people who are really understanding of what the benefits and the philosophies and the point of playing in nature is all about. And you all being here and participating in this workshop, I thank you for being those champions. I would imagine you're here because you're interested in learning how you can introduce playing in nature more to children in your care. And so that's really what's, it comes from the adults to then expose the children to this type of play. But as we all know, champions, they can only go so far. We have big dreams, and a lot of us, we just need help from our community to make those dreams come to fruition. So not only do we need you as the champions, but we also need the interest from the children that you're working with and playing with, and the children in your care. We need interest from your family members if you're going to take other family members or friends with you on these journeys outside the playing in nature. If you're the one champion that's like ready to go outside and play, but the children aren't into it and the family members aren't having it and the friends don't want to be there, it's going to be an uphill battle. So the interest from everyone participating in the activity is really important. It's also equally important to have some sort of activity visioning process, and that's kind of a very serious term for really just having an understanding or a vision or an idea of what activity are you looking to offer. Is it going to be child-led? Is it going to be structured play? What is your philosophy? How do you want your child to interact and connect with nature? So it's really good to have that understanding before going into it so that you can create this experience for a child and then let them take it to where their interest leads them, if of course that's part of your activity visioning process. I would suggest if you're going to play in nature, it's always nice to get a bit of training. So like first aid training, that's always a wonderful thing to have, regardless if you're working with children inside or outside. But if you're going now outside, especially if you're going, into a forest quite a ways, it's nice to have some first aid, and you may even need some wilderness first aid depending on how far your journey will take you. Also, being in the area that we're in, I'm presenting from Vancouver Island. There's bear and cougar here that we share the forest with, so we are bear and cougar trained. So I would suggest having some sort of bear and cougar awareness, or whatever wildlife that you live with in your forest. Have some awareness of what to do if you should encounter a wild animal in your space. You want to make sure that you're taking the necessary steps to ensure the safety and comfort of everyone in that experience. Safety guidelines to your activities. Again, that's sort of a very serious way of just saying, just to understand like how are you going to act when certain situations arise? And we're going to talk about that more in a moment. If you're a family taking your child out, I'm sure you're not going to devise a handbook of policies and procedures, but just to have an understanding, like policies like how are you going to toilet? How are you going to snack? How are you going to walk together in the forest? Like figure all those pieces out before you go outside so that you're really setting everyone up for success. Activity supplies, that's another thing that it's sort of needed for this experience to be successful. So if you're looking to, simply go out to the beach and dig in the sand with shovels, what activities will you need? It seems simple, but having the idea and then preparing all the supplies to make sure that the idea comes to fruition is the next step. So just make sure that whatever activity you're looking to provide, you have the necessary supplies to do so. Required gear and clothing, that's so important. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And then site assessment, again, equally important. We're going to talk about that in a moment as well. So just going back to safety guidelines to your activities, like I mentioned, toileting, there's, like are you going to wash hands before you have snack? We always do because our children are playing outside and we want them to interact with the mud and the dirt. So how are you going to wash your hands outside? What are you going to do if a dog comes into your space, on or off leash? First aid we talked about a little bit. Foul weather, what's your foul weather plan? Are you going to get all suited up, and whether it's sun or rain or snow, you're outside and you're ready to go? Or if it snows, are you going to call it? Or if it rains, you're going to call it? Or if winds pick up, how are you going to interact with the changing weather? Wildlife we talked about. Other things to think about, it's like earthquake. What happens if you lose your child? Have a plan in place. Now we have COVID-19 to consider, so that's going to change a little bit with your outdoor play. Here in BC, if those of you that remember in September and October, we dealt with smoky conditions. What happens if that arises while you're in play? Are you going to continue playing, or what is your cutoff point to then, close down that outdoor play and go inside? What happens if you find a potentially contaminated item outside? You're going to be in public spaces, and how are you going to deal with that? Or people displaying suspicious and inappropriate behaviors. These are things that you have to, again, not again, for the first time I'm mentioning it, it's not something that you need to fear of or be scared of, but just to bring your awareness to, like bear and cougar awareness. You're in public spaces, so it's just nice to have some, just to think about it beforehand so that if and when those situations arise, you have a plan in place. Required gear, it's so important. There's a motto in the nature preschool community that you may have heard. There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing decisions, and that's so true. In the weather that we have, you need the children dressed appropriately and properly for the weather. If they're wet, if they're cold, they're done. I mean, so am I, and so are most people. So just make sure that you have the adequate clothing and the gear in place. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on gear, especially for young children that are constantly outgrowing it, but have the proper underlayers in place, like the wools and the fleeces. Don't use cottons because that's going to absorb the water and make children wet and cold. But make sure you invest, especially here in BC, good rain jacket, good rain pants, good gum boots, so that they can really interact with the weather and they can interact with the ground and they can connect to that environment. In our program, our preferred color choice for all outerwear is red because it offers such a nice contrast with the green canopy. So that might be something you want to consider. I'd like to dive into a little bit about site assessment and how to utilize different types of outdoor spaces for playing in nature. This is so important. It's really easy for us to be sitting in the comfort of our homes and say, oh yeah, I want to go to this forest and do this activity, or head over to that beach and play this game. But without actually going to that site beforehand and seeing what it offers, it may not offer the meaningful playing experience that you have intended for your child. So I would suggest, if you have the ability to do so, is go check out the site before you bring a child or children to it and make sure that it's offering the experience that you're looking to provide your child. Rather than getting there, everyone's all excited and realize, wait a minute, we can't play hide and go seek here. And then that's going to be a big bummer and disappointment. The other thing that you need to consider are the risks versus the hazards when you're outside. I mean, we have to consider that wherever we are, especially with children, whether it's indoor or outdoor, but outside it's a very different type of risk and hazard assessment. And before we get into it, I just want to define the terms, and just so that we understand the difference between what is a risk and what is a hazard. A risk, by definition, is the potential, that's the key word there, the potential for uncontrolled loss of something of value. So an example is like climbing that tree is a risk. Now, a hazard, by definition, is a danger. So an example in the sentence is climbing that rotten tree is a hazard. Now, that's the big difference there. And I'm just going to go through a couple slides here, starting with slide number 2, so I can point out differences between risks or hazards. So if you see in slide number 2 there, we have a boy crossing that kind of a bridge of rocks. And when we first went to that site and we said, and I just want to begin by saying, this is site assessment. This isn't the type of play that the child is doing. This isn't risky play. This is just assessing the site before the children even arrive. So we assess it and say, those rocks, is that a risk or is that a hazard? Sure, that child can fall. Can that child get hurt? Absolutely. That child can get hurt in the playground. That child can get hurt, slipping and falling on a sidewalk. The key here is that there's no hazards in place. It's risk. That the risk is that the child is going to walk across and there is the potential for that child to fall. And if they fall in the water on either side, we measure the water to make sure that it's not higher than the toe of their boot. And so if that child was to fall into the water or to the right or the left, they're not going to fall in too deep. It's very shallow water. So that is a risk right there. So we allow the children to play in that area. If we move on to slide number 3, that is an obvious hazard. There's no question about it. You can see that there's evidence of falling trees in the foreground to the left there. There's a big leaner tree there stemming from the foreground from the right. And the thing with trees, you can have the healthiest of trees fall down on the sunniest blue sky day, and you can have the most rotten tree stand in the biggest windstorm. So it's just that's just sort of a just a reminder that you always have to be aware of trees and their ability to stand or fall in all weather and in all healthy tree conditions. But if you're going to see something like that, no need to risk it, because that is obviously a hazard. So when we once played in that area, now we wouldn't because of that tree, and we don't want to bring the risk involved there. Moving on to slide number 4. This is a really interesting situation because we have both risks and hazards in the same outdoor classroom where we take our forest friends. Where the children are playing along that water shoreline, that's all risky play. Can they fall and slip? Sure. If they fall right into that shoreline, it's shallow enough where it's not too deep. It's again just the height of the top of their toe. But are they allowed to crawl over and climb that log? Absolutely not. That's a hazard, because if they were to fall into that water, it's quite deep, and they can hurt themselves. So in that slide, that's there's risks and hazards in that one site assessment. And then finally, moving on to slide number 5. This is a pretty obvious one. This is a hazard. You can see like what a dynamic, awesome place to play for children. Hide and seek, like tons of games. Tag, you can just do so much in that space. But of course, if you're gonna happen upon a space that's just littered with garbage, that's a hazard. So I encourage you not to carry on your play, because that would be very unsafe and uncomfortable for everyone. Now that was talking about site assessment, risks versus hazards, but I'd now like to go into a little bit about risky playing, which is a completely different subject. So I like to talk about risky play and comfort zones. That's a really nice way to start this. And I just want you to think about some of these questions that I'm going to ask you. As a parent or guardian, how comfortable are you with your children climbing trees, running fast on a wet log, working with knives, playing near water, involved in consensual rough and tumble play, and finally playing hide and go seek in the forest? And just think for a moment, how did you feel answering those questions? So risky play, let's define what that is. The Norwegian researcher Ellen Sandseter, she's one of the world's leading advocates for risky play. She defines it as any activity that is thrilling or exciting and involves some possibility of physical injury. So an example, when I climb that tree, I am participating in risky play. And she's introduced 6 categories of risky play. One is play with great height, such as danger of injury from falling, play with high speed, such as uncontrolled speed and pace that can lead to collision with something or someone, play with dangerous tools that can lead to injuries, play near dangerous elements, such as with water or fire, where you can fall into or from something, rough and tumble play, where the children can harm each other, and finally, where the children can disappear or get lost. So where the children, let's say they get to disappear from the supervision of adults, or they get lost alone. So those were the 6 categories of risky play that Ellen had talked about. And these are some benefits to risky play that I'd like to introduce. Just like the benefits of playing in nature, the list is on and on and on. Equally and similarly, the list is just as grand for risky play, such as teaches caution, courage, and knowledge about one's own abilities and limitations, raises awareness about developing one's own risk assessment capabilities, provides an opportunity for children to be in control of their actions, builds resilience, confidence, coping skills, and self-regulation, and on and on and on the list goes. And there's a direct relationship between risky play and those benefits. The more children are involved in that risky play, the more they're involved in increased benefits. Whenever I talk about risky play, and I've hosted or facilitated many workshops on it, just the word risk, it has a certain connotation. And I just want you to hear some of these phrases. This is a list of phrases containing the word risk, and just sort of feel, get a sense of how you feel when I say these phrases, such as a risk taker. Is it worth the risk? Run the risk. There's a risk of rain. Risk one's neck. Don't risk it for the biscuit. I love that one. Risk life and limb. This is a high risk situation at one's own risk. I mean, generally speaking, the connotation of the word risk is a negative one, right? Like risk is like almost something you want to back off and back away from in fear. Fear. But in risky play, I want to change that association with people, change the connotation. Risky play should really be, you should have some like positive, uplifting feelings, because risk in this situation is not a 4-letter word. That was a phrase coined by Chris Filler, a good friend of mine and mentor in this whole nature education community. He said that risk is not a 4-letter word, and I couldn't agree with him more. What we're trying to do with risky plays, we're trying to change the association of risk from getting hurt to uncertain outcomes. If the play offers a large chance of getting hurt, then we simply won't allow the play, nor will we put the children in that position. But if the play offers uncertain outcomes, then we run the risk that children might find themselves in a position where they could fail. And it's in the process of failing where children learn. Children want to fail. They want a fair share of challenge where they do fail in order to make their play fun. It makes their play engaging. It makes it rewarding. If they keep succeeding in their play, they tend to get bored very quickly. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about that. I'd like to bring your attention to slide number 6. The title of this slide is called Boredom versus Anxiety and Playing in Flow. This is such an awesome slide. The source is from a book called Flow by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I always butcher that last name, and my apologies. I try my hardest. But what he says is that all play falls somewhere on this chart, depending on how challenging it is to the child and how many of the child's skills it uses. The ideal place to be is in the flow channel, in that white strip, that direct flow channel that's stemming off from the bottom right-hand corner. Because in the flow channel, the challenge of what you're doing is roughly equal to the skills you have to do that very thing. So if we move on to slide number 7, this is a really great example of understanding how the flow channel works in relation to anxiety and boredom. If you start with number 1, that's your starting point. Here, let's say a child is climbing a tree for the very first time, and they're practicing climbing up the first branch, which is tricky, but it's manageable at first. And they're trying to lift their foot and place it onto the branch while holding onto the tree to lift themselves up. At this point, they're experiencing flow because the challenge of what they're doing is roughly equal to their skill level, and so therefore they're having fun. Now, this is where you want your children to be when they're playing. But what happens is, from the starting point, one of two things can happen. They can move to point 2. And if they move to point 2, that's where they improve their skills to a point where they get bored of climbing onto the first branch. And the challenge of climbing the tree is now lower than their skill level, and so they no longer experience flow. That's one way that child can move. Another way the child can move out of flow, I mean, they could continue in flow, which is the ideal, but another way for them to move out of the flow child is if they move up into anxiety, into the third point, and that's where they challenge themselves at a level that stresses them out. So for example, let's say they decide to climb a second branch, and here the challenge of climbing a tree is greater than their skill level, and they no longer experience flow, and that's going to cause anxiety. But depending on where they're at, whether it's point 2 or point 3, there are 2 ways to get back into the flow channel. If they're bored, and that's point 2, they will need to find a way to increase the challenge of climbing, like, for example, sitting on the branch and waving hi to you, or climbing to the next branch, etc. And that will get them back to point 4, back into the flow child. But if they're at point 3 and they're feeling anxious and stressed out, they will need to work on improving their tree climbing skills to get back into that flow channel. They could also decrease the challenge, but that's a bit more difficult in practice. So this chart, it really explains why flow activities lead to growth and discovery. A child cannot enjoy doing the same thing at the same level for too long. They either grow bored or frustrated, and then the desire to enjoy themselves again pushes them to stretch their skills or to discover new opportunities for using them. And one of the beauties of the flow channel is that every single activity that a child plays, it falls somewhere on this diagram. And the activities that let them experience flow, they're the ones that will make them the happiest. I bring this up because it's really important in talking about age appropriateness with playing in nature. You want to be sure that whether your child is an infant, a toddler, or preschool, whatever age your child is, that you're always offering age-appropriate activities so that your child is in a constant state of flow. The best way to do this is to start small and easy and let your child play, tell you if they are ready to graduate to the next step. That's what it's all about, graduating to the next level of play. So for example, if we talk about let's talk about blowing bubbles, right? Children love blowing bubbles outside. Depending on the development of the child, start out with your child sitting on the grass while you blow bubbles around them, and let them play as they choose to while surrounded by the bubbles, right? It's a bit of structured play in that you're blowing the bubbles, but what you're allowing them to do in that environment is unstructured, in that you're allowing them to just do whatever they choose to. And then if they are ready to graduate to the next level, have them stand up while you blow the bubbles. After that, move around them while blowing the bubbles and let them crawl or walk or run to the bubbles. And then finally, give them the bottle of soap so that they can blow their own bubbles. So age appropriateness of play is really important in keeping them in their flow and always meeting them where they're at and graduating, allowing them to graduate themselves to the next level and meet them at that level. This bubble activity, it's a really simple example, but it's one that highlights the graduation of a child's play in nature, and it shows how it meets them where they are in their flow. We wouldn't want to start this bubble play with putting a bottle of bubbly soap in an infant's hand and expect them to blow bubbles, for that might stress them out, right? That'll take them out of their flow. And likewise, we probably wouldn't sit down a 5, 6, or 7-year-old child and blow bubbles around them and, ask them not to move, because that will certainly make them bored. So it's really important to choose your activities wisely and based on the ability level of your children, and always keep in mind that they may graduate to the next level at any time, and vice versa. They may need to put the brakes on their play if they're finding it too challenging. So that's why I just wanted to introduce that flow chart. It's really, or that flow channel. It's it's just really important to understand, you want a really healthy balance of challenges and failures, so that they're successful in their play and they're enjoying that play. You want, of course, play to be fun.
Thank you all once again for joining. It was really a pleasure presenting.
Oh, that was an absolutely fantastic note for us to end on. And so just as we wrap up, I just want to remind all our viewers that we will be here next Thursday for our last session. Next session is going to be a little bit interesting because we have a panel actually. It's going to be, the lived experience of a parent, a lived experience of an educator, and how bringing up children is not just the role and responsibility of parents. It takes a village. And that's our topic for next week. So I look forward to all of you being here. Don't forget to visit your local library, check out all the great books and resources on our website, www.bflgrowscommunity.org. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week. And thank you to the Ministry of Children and Family Development for helping us make this happen. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Bye-bye.